Last summer the team at Arkane Studios released Mooncrash, a DLC pack for their critically acclaimed 2017 immersive simplary that wrapped its systems into a roguelike of 5 survivors escaping from a secret moon base. It was a fresh and innovative spin on the immersive sim, a genre of game Arkane has helped advance on Define through both pre- and THEDISHONORADS, and today at the D-led level designer Richard Wilson took the stage to explain how and why it was built. According to him, Mooncrash has a common origin story. A number of developers were set up to work on some DLC, while others moved on to other projects, and they decided to try something outside their comfort zone as a way of stretching their legs creatively. When you go from project to project in AAA, a lot of the time, you are solving the exact same problems every time, said Wilson. This does not offer much in the way of creative growth. Sometimes this can even cause people plateau jump ship between projects. The team decided to have an internal game jam, using pre-system mined assets, and some of-field results, which include everything from a type and dance party to a tentacle grenade to a working basketball game, made it into what became Mooncrash. How some scrap elements and an internal game jam led to Mooncrash. The experience was really invaluable. A lot of the team members got to play with new tools and step outside of their box a little bit, said Wilson. Everyone embraced this spirit of exploration. It turns out a lot of the design team were already playing a lot of roguelikes in their spare time anyway. So Mooncrash was pitched from the jump as a roguelike, cross-genre exploration, built out from some features cut from the original game. We explored some ideas for random level elements in Prey that ended up getting cut for scope. So we took that and leaned more heavily into that, said Wilson. Mooncrash seemed like a natural extension of those ideas. Since the team was short on roguelike design experience, they began studying landmark games in the genre to understand how to think about design problems like progression and world persistence between player deaths. Games like Spelunky, Rogue Legacy and Risk of Rain. They were basically masterclasses in these other spheres of thought that we had not explored yet, Wilson admitted. Arkane also worked out deconstructed the immersive sim genre to try and figure out what the component parts are, hints, snippy emails to read, etc., and whether they could work well in a roguelike framework. Character skill trees. For example, this was something we had on the blog when we were looking at it, and we decided to keep it, said Wilson. A linear, bit-by-bit narrative. That was something we examined and decided it did not belong in the DLC. While sorting out what to include in Mooncrash, Wilson says the studio also tried to preserve as much of what made Prey successful as possible, like Arkane's penchant for effective environmental storytelling. The bulk of our storytelling happens in the environment, said Wilson. This worked really well in Mooncrash, because it takes place in a defined location, and the main character's job is to find out what happened there. We wanted the fresh start of a roguelike, where you can try new things without the fear of mistakes. Player agency was also a key concern for the Arkane team, and Wilson admits that while the high-level agency available in Mooncrash is less than what's possible in Prey, given the size and space restrictions, a lot of work went into ensuring the low-level agency players have, to say, choose how to move through an area or bypass an enemy. It's about the same. Wilson also noted that since systemic game design is one of the core pillars of Arkane's design philosophy, The team tried to fill Mooncrash with mood design elements, like the hackable, prey grass blocking, typhon gates, sprinkled throughout the base, for players to mess with in interesting ways. This is something Wilson says Arkane's audience expects. But this approach to design also has the side benefit of keeping the game feeling fresher far longer as players progress through multiple playthroughs. Wilson provided this visualization of how a player might progress through a big game like Prey, seeing a significant chunk, but far from all, of the expensive assets shown here as dollars on each playthrough. It may look like there are 1,000 ways to get around these things, but in truth the player only has one or two ways in the beginning, added Wilson. Then they gain more tools as they progress through the game, so it sort of means that as a player gets tired of dealing with Typhon gates, they gain more tools for dealing with the gates, and that creates a sense of progression. Here Wilson tries to sum up the design of Mooncrash in a similar slide, as the restrictions on what a player can accomplish in a given run ensure they will see more of the game in shorter playthroughs. Arkane's process of fitting the framework of immersive sim design around a cast of 5 playable characters, players start with access to just one and unlock the rest during play, was also tricky, as one of the core selling points of a game like Prey is a player's ability to customize their abilities to suit their playstyle. In Mooncrash, each character has a much broader set of unlockable skills. A design decision, Wilson says, was made in order to help players quickly grasp what a character doesn't have. Each character was focused so the player could make informed decisions, said Wilson. All the smaller trees, they have enough wiggle room for the player to express themselves, but they were also heavily themed so the player could make informed decisions. The studio also hoped that providing multiple playable characters with neuro proficiencies would encourage players to try out different playstyles. Wilson gave a quick shout-out to Suspicious Developments' hit Signature as a great example of a game that does this well. We wanted the fresh start of a roguelike, where you can try new things without the fear of mistakes, said Wilson. So we introduced this concept of resetting the simulation. But there's still a level of persistence between simulation resets, in the form of simulation star points the player earns while playing, which can then be spent to modify the simulation in future runs. Wilson says Arkane fell in love with this aspect of roguelike design, in part because of the sense of playing a co-op game with yourself that it can foster in Mooncrash, as you might expect. He also notes Mooncrashwound up being much easier than Prey for players to jump into and out of a playthrough multiple times. When you look at a game that's 15 hours long, and there are choices to be made in the middle, it's possible the player can come back to that game without remembering what those choices were, said Wilson. If you have got a shorter game, players are more likely to remember those choices in the time it takes to get back to that choice, and they are more likely to play your game more times to see those different outcomes. However, he cautions that if the choices are too subtle and organic, something Wilson says Arkane struggled with on the Dishonored games, players can often board through them without realizing they have made a significant choice at all, keeping the game feeling fresh run after run after run after. To address these issues in Mooncrash, adopted a more roguelike approach, and so we wanted to shorten the replay loops, said Wilson. One problem this model can cause, however, is boredom from repetition. To deal with that, Arkane built multiple starting locations into the game, so when a new character started, they due starting a different location than a previous character, but in the same level. This helped keep level load times low during runs, but also wound up helping players feel more familiar and comfortable with the game during character shifts, to keep players from getting bored of seeing the same areas on enemies time after time. Wilson says, "We dipped our toes into random content generation, but rather than focusing on the amount of variability we could offer, we tried to focus on meaningful variability. In Mooncrash, one of the ways we tackled this is through what we called hazard channels," he explained. The team created 5 different hazard channel states: irradiated, on fire,